Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, May 30th, 2025. Time to bring on another show and bring on another weekend. And I don't know what Trump has planned for this weekend. I assume golfing somewhere. I guess it's... I don't know if it's whether he's abandoning Florida now for New Jersey. I think last weekend he did his golfing in New Jersey, and I guess it's warm enough, right? It's just not beautiful weather yet. So we'll see where he goes. I don't know whether he was time limited because of his side trip to insult everybody at West Point that he ended up in New Jersey, or whether he's making the shift now. This season is over in Pervalago. Time to shift things to Bedminster. And so I guess shorter plane ride for him to blab. Maybe they're looking forward to that in the White House. But shorter time on the plane to blab to reporters about anything at all. And so, therefore, perhaps somewhat less concentrated crazy coming out over the weekend. And then he calms himself down during golf. And, good. It lowers the number of invasion threats and other threats to destroy, the whole human race or the international order. It's going to be tough to ignore anything other than the New York Times today, as it turns out. But we'll try. Because there's a lot to catch up on and some impactful writing, although it does make one say, and I don't know what the logistics of getting this story out really were, so I can't speak to that. Things are complicated. Logistics are tough, and the reality of life in the world is difficult, and if you're feeling generous, you got to keep that in mind every once in a while. For instance, basically, we learned from, we knew this already, sort of, but now we get some sort of definitive account in Times New Roman print from the New York Times, letting us know that, all those times that Elon Musk, had hugely dilated pupils and acted like he was on drugs and told everybody that he was on drugs, and other people said, he takes lots of ketamine, he's completely on drugs. Well, now it's established. And when I say the logistics of it, I'm sure that these reporters... I'm sure that these reporters wish they could have told America this when it still mattered, if it ever mattered. I guess it didn't matter because we all knew it was the case and it just went on anyway. The president's on drugs. He has his own, imported weirdo Sudafed that he keeps in the drawer. And who knows what else. And, of course, you'll all recall that during the first term in office, when Ronnie Jackson and his successors ran the White House physician's office, they just kept an open pharmaceutical drawer, and people just came in and took whatever they wanted. And some of the stuff they actually doled out a little more carefully, but they gave people fentanyl right there in the White House, I understand. So that seemed a little weird, too, considering you're now closing the border and imposing punitive tariffs, allegedly, on other countries because of their importation of fentanyl while you're giving it out like candy. Whatever. I'm just saying we knew, and the New York Times knew, and the New York Times knew we knew, but the logistics of it probably were. Well, get someone to go on the record. If you can't get enough people to go on the record, it's a real danger to make this accusation. Musk is extraordinarily wealthy, very vindictive, has the levers of government in his hand. He could really, he could make a lot of problems. But if you have solid reporting, fine. And I guess I could see where you didn't get the solid reporting you needed until the guy made his alleged exit, whether it's a real exit or not. It convinced people that they should loosen up and talk, maybe. Or, of course, they were waiting until later because they were going to write a book, and the book is now submitted, and something, and they have the tour dates booked. I don't know what it is, but now the New York Times is telling us what I think we already knew, and we better read it because everybody's talking about it now. On the campaign trail, now the question will be, will the story reveal that this was happening during his period in government the same way. On the campaign trail, they're willing to say, Elon Musk juggled drugs and family drama. Family drama being, I guess, the euphemism for I impregnate anybody who will accept my, it's morning, everybody. And I've just, had a quick breakfast, and it's very difficult to, to say the words. But all right, so family drama, 19 different baby mamas, whatever. I've got weird ideas about repopulating the planet. And by the way, this should be read alongside, is it Michelle Greenberg's opinion piece? And I think the opinion may be a solid one. Elon Musk's legacy is disease, starvation, and death. Remember, repopulate the planet, but also kill everybody on it, if they have darker skin than me, or if they're yucky people from Africa, which I hate. Only the white guys from Africa are cool. All right. Okay. So it's a little bit of a downer, but on the campaign trail anyway, Elon Musk juggled drugs. I love juggling drugs. And family drama. You got to watch out for the ones in the hypodermic needles. You screw that juggling up and pow, all of a sudden, yeah. Anyway, how do you juggle fentanyl, right? That's a good question, right? As soon as you get in the room with it, you're dead. Anyway, as Mr. Musk entered President Trump's orbit with a bunch of drugs, his private life grew increasingly tumultuous and his drug use was more intense than previously known. It's a hard and stressful thing. In fact, just yesterday, people were circulating a news clip, Fox News, I'm sure, of Dan, is it Bongino, giving an interview, basically talking about his role as the deputy director of the FBI and how hard it is to give up your whole personal life to this tremendous mission. And it's so hard for him, and he's separated from his wife, and he's there 24 hours a day, and it's hard to do things. And yeah, you took a job that was way over your head, man. It's going to be really difficult and tough. And he's crying about it, and I don't know why he's sad. And he also, I guess he tried to give a boost to his boss, Kash Patel, too, saying, yeah, Kash is there all the time, too. He's there earlier than me. I know he's there. I'm in my office. I hear him. I think he said, if he turns on the faucet in his office, I hear it. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I guess it's supposed to be taken as, well, he's there all the time, even though we know he's not there all the time. He's jetting to his girlfriend's house all the time, working remotely from Las Vegas as FBI director. So I guess he thought he had to maybe cover for and boost Kash in that respect. And I'll have to go and run and get you that article. But first, let's talk about Elon Musk being on drugs and ruining everybody's lives and probably wrecking the world. And certainly the United States government. Kirsten Grind and Megan Twohey are the writers of this piece. I don't know whether they're teaming up on a book or not, or whether they were rushing this story to print as quickly as they possibly could, but they just couldn't get the confirmations they needed. You tell me. As Elon Musk became one of Donald J. Trump's closest allies last year, leading raucous rallies and donating about $275 million to help him win the presidency, he was also using drugs far more intensely than previously known, according to people familiar with his activities. Mr. Musk's drug consumption went well beyond occasional use. He told people he was taking so much ketamine, a powerful anesthetic, that it was affecting his bladder, and a known effect of chronic use, not, I guess, unlike all the effects of chronic use of opioids by Rush Limbaugh. It's amazing how much influence people in the right-wing sphere have, who also just happen to be, more or less addicted to drugs and drug-addled 24 hours a day and screaming crazy conspiracy theories at people, and now they're trying to enact them as federal government policy. It's just very odd, is all I'm saying. Anyway, so he took ecstasy and psychedelic mushrooms, and he traveled with a daily medication box that held about 20 pills, including ones with the markings of the stimulant Adderall, according to a photo of the box and people who have seen it. It is unclear. Remember why? I was just thinking about way back when they had just the idea of having the photo of it. Didn't they have a picture that they said was of Hunter Biden and, oh, look, there's cocaine in this picture. And then it turned out, A, not to be cocaine, but this was a huge thing. We have a photo of it. This is proof. We got to do something. And of course, Hunter wasn't, taking an active role in the government, but never mind all of that. And please keep in mind that the true scandal here is that Joe Biden was too old to take ketamine and mushrooms and ecstasy and wreck the government and murder people around the globe. I mean, come on, get with the times, right? He was so old. That's the real crime. Worse than Watergate, by the way, Jake Tapper. I don't talk to Jake Tapper much or anything. Back in the olden days of Twitter, when he talked to people on Twitter and would get into little beefs on the side with them, he did that with me, and I forget what it was even about. Who cares? Anyway, the experience was not a great one, as you can imagine. But Jake Tapper's like the same age, same circles, more or less, growing up kind of thing. He's a Philadelphia area guy, and I was a northern New Jersey area guy. But, same timeline, same trajectory, I guess, as kids. Anyway, we've discussed that to some extent. Jake, only commentary I have for you on the book thing besides, I don't care. Write a book. Who cares? I'm not going to read the book anyway. I was never going to read the book. Even a good one I wouldn't have read. But you got to be ashamed of yourself to pull out the worse than Watergate line. And I think you knew it when you said it. Anyway, back to the other book writers, maybe. It's unclear whether Mr. Musk, 53, was taking drugs when he became a fixture at the White House this year and was handed the power to slash the federal bureaucracy. But he has exhibited erratic behavior, insulting cabinet members, gesturing like a Nazi. I guess that too. That's how you have to clear legal with that one. Gesturing like a Nazi. And garbling his answers in a staged interview. That's true. Oh, and Justice reminds me, it was sawdust, like it was in a wood shop, maybe? I don't know. Why was there sawdust around? But anyway, no, it's piles of cocaine, which I understand. Lots of people, by the way, keep their stockpiles of cocaine just in open piles on tables around, not when there's any party going around. Just, don't put this in any kind of container or anything. Anyway, at the same time, Mr. Musk's family life had grown increasingly tumultuous as he has negotiated overlapping romantic relationships and just regular robotic sex relationships too as well, and private legal battles involving his growing brood of children. This is deeply weird stuff, by the way, people. I mean, this is almost sane-washed, and it's meant to look kooky. It's very odd. Growing brood of children, according to documents and interviews. Now, on Wednesday evening, Mr. Musk announced that he was ending his stint with the government, and varying accounts of whether he was thrown out or it was just going to happen anyway because his stupid status as special government employee. Not that I believe that they were going to obey the law and that, whatever it is. Anyway, but Musk wants to do it on his own terms. He announced he's ending his stint after lamenting how much time he had spent on politics instead of his businesses, which should also throw him out. To the extent any of those things are publicly traded, they should chuck this, look, you got to go to rehab. You can't be the CEO of this place. You're out. Mr. Musk and his lawyer did not respond to a request for comment this week about his drug use in personal life because he was too high, probably. He has previously said he was prescribed ketamine for depression, but so what? He's a multi-billionaire, so he just bought it, even when the prescription ran out, I'm sure. Or he just bought himself a doctor. Taking about every 2 weeks. And he told his biographer, I really don't like doing illegal drugs. I'd rather take over the government and legalize them, I guess, is what the thinking was. The White House did not respond to questions about whether it had asked Mr. Musk to take drug tests. I'm sure they didn't. As a large government contractor, his aerospace firm, SpaceX, must maintain a drug-free workforce and administers random drug tests to its employees, unless they're very rich. But Mr. Musk has received advanced warnings of the test, according to people close to the process. Oh, so they really did do it. That's interesting. SpaceX did not respond to questions about those warnings, which would be interesting. And also, by the way, did they really test his bodily fluids or whatever they tested for those things? Or did they just buy some clean stuff or what? Anyway, I figure the guy who is supposedly grabbing the contract to rebuild the FAA's air traffic control system And 2, build this strange, weirdo, science fiction, fictitious Golden Dome missile defense system, which nobody can build, much less him, and all of his rockets explode anyway. Why not let him be totally on drugs and steal all the money? Seems like a good idea. Mr. Musk, who joined the president's inner circle after making a vast fortune on cars, interesting way of putting it, satellites and rocket ships that explode, and cars that explode for that matter, has long been known for grandiose statements and a mercurial personality, as if that had anything to do with drugs. Supporters see him as an eccentric genius whose slash and burn management style is key to his success. That's the green/sane washing that all truly rich people get to enjoy. He's not a lunatic. He's not a dangerous idiot. He's eccentric. That's what money buys you. But like Greg's told us that 100 times. But last year, as he jumped into the political arena, some people who knew him worried about his frequent drug use, mood swings, and fixation on having more children. This account of his behavior is based on private messages obtained by the New York Times, as well as interviews with more than a dozen people who have known or worked with him. This year, some of his longtime friends have renounced him, pointing to some of his public conduct. Elon has pushed the boundaries of his bad behavior more and more, said Philip Lowe. It's spelled Lowe. I don't know if it's pronounced Lau, probably Lowe, L-O-W, a neuroscientist and one-time friend of Mr. Musk's who criticized him for his Nazi-like gesture, here it is again, at a rally. And by the way, just thinking of Neuralink and we're going to put a brain implant chip in your brain, don't worry about it. I'm just completely whacked out on drugs. Okay. And some women are challenging Mr. Musk for control of their children. One of his former partners, Claire Boucher, the musician known as Grimes, I didn't know what her real name was, has been fighting with Mr. Musk over their 5-year-old son known as X, which you're not on drugs, right? What did you name your kids? Mr. Musk is extremely attached to the boy, taking him to the Oval Office and high-profile gatherings that are broadcast around the world. Ms. Boucher has privately complained that the appearances violate a custody settlement in which she and Mr. Musk agreed to try to keep their children out of the public eye, according to people familiar with her concerns and the provision, which has not been previously reported. She has told people that she worries about the boy's safety and that frequent travel and sleep deprivation are harming his health. Another mother, the right-leaning writer Ashley St. Clair, revealed in February that she had a secret relationship with Mr. Musk and had given birth to his 14th known child. Mr. Musk offered her a large settlement to keep his paternity concealed, but she refused. He sought a gag order in New York to force Ms. St. Clair to stop speaking publicly, she said in an interview. All of a sudden, he realizes maybe it wasn't a great idea to just have children with everybody. Wow, I can't believe there's blowback from that. Next up, a ketamine habit. Mr. Musk has described some of his mental health issues in interviews and social media, saying in one post that he has felt great highs, terrible lows, and unrelenting stress. He has denounced traditional therapy and antidepressants because they might help. He's got better ideas, you see. I bought a rocket company and I bought a car company, so I have great ideas about, neurological issues. Anyway, he plays video games for hours on end. I don't know if that's necessarily a mental health issue, but it's not great. I know some people who do that, but they're responsible for a great deal less than he is. He struggles with binge eating, according to people familiar with his habits, and takes weight loss medication. And he posts day and night on his social media platform X. And most people don't just buy the platform, they just post. That's enough. You can do that without buying it, Mr. Musk has a history of recreational drug use, the Wall Street Journal reported last year. Some board members at Tesla, his electric vehicle company, in case you didn't know, have worried about his use of drugs, including Ambien, a sleep medication. In an interview in March 2024, the journalist Don Lemon pressed him on his drug use. Mr. Musk said he only took a small amount of ketamine, about once every 2 weeks, as a prescribed treatment for negative moods. Is that even what it's for? I don't know. If you've used too much ketamine, you can't really get work done. Pardon me, holy cow. And I have a lot of work, he said. He had actually developed a far more serious habit, the Times found. And by the way, that that will help color your understanding of his thing. Remember when he was wrecking everything at a rapid clip and said, my superpower is working weekends, nights and weekends. I stay up all hours and I work hard, and the bureaucrats won't do that. And they cede the field to me every weekend, and that's my superpower. Well, it's not that superpower if you're just fueled by drugs the whole time. I mean, you are doing it, but I don't know what it is you're doing, and neither do you. Well, anyway, he had actually developed a far more serious ketamine habit, the Times found. Mr. Musk has been using ketamine often, sometimes daily, and mixing it with other drugs, like the doctors say you should, I'm sure. According to people familiar with his consumption, the line between medical use and recreation was blurry, troubling some people close to him. He also took ecstasy and psychedelic mushrooms at private gatherings across the United States and in at least one other country, according to those who attended the events. And then the piece is illustrated with that weird picture of him leaping into the air on the campaign stage, hands in the air and a coat flapping and a T-shirt up and the belly out. All right. The Food and Drug Administration has formally approved the use of ketamine only as an anesthetic in medical procedures. Of course, by the way, he did at some point, I'm sure, have the power to change that. Doctors with a special license may prescribe it for psychiatric disorders like depression, but the agency has warned about its risks, which came into sharp relief after the death of the actor Matthew Perry. The drug has psychedelic properties and can cause dissociation from reality. Anybody seen that? Chronic use can lead to addiction and problems with bladder pain and control. By the spring of last year, Mr. Musk was ramping up criticism of President Joseph R. Biden Jr., particularly his policies on illegal immigration and diversity initiatives. Mr. Musk was also facing federal investigations into his businesses. Regulators were looking into crashes of Tesla's self-driving cars and allegations of racism at its factories, among other complaints. There are at least half a dozen initiatives of significance to take me down, he wrote in a text message to someone close to him last May. The Biden administration views me as the number 2 threat after Trump. I can't be president, but I can help Trump defeat Biden, and I will, he added. He publicly endorsed Mr. Trump in July. Around that time, Mr. Musk told people that his ketamine use was causing bladder issues, just like they say it does. According to people familiar with the conversations, on October 5th, he appeared with Mr. Trump at a rally for the first time, bouncing up and down around the candidate. That evening, Mr. Musk shared his excitement with a person close to him. I'm feeling more optimistic after tonight, he wrote in a text message. Tomorrow, we unleash the anomaly in the matrix. Oh, boy. This is not something on the chessboard, so they will be quite surprised, Mr. Musk added about an hour later. Lasers from space. What? After Mr. Trump won, Mr. Musk rented a cottage at Mar-a-Lago, the president-elect's Florida resort, to assist with the transition. Mr. Musk attended personnel meetings and sat in on phone calls with foreign leaders, and he crafted plans to overhaul the federal government under the new Department of Government Efficiency. Wow. All on drugs. That is awesome. Next up is the family secrets thing. Mr. Musk has also been juggling the messy consequences of his efforts to produce more babies. That is an interesting way of putting it, too. I mean, it's flat out right out there, but okay. By 2022, Mr. Musk, who has married and divorced 3 times, has fathered 6 children in his first marriage, including one who died in infancy, as well as 2 with Ms. Butcher. She told people she believed they were in a monogamous relationship and building a family together. But while a surrogate was pregnant with their 3rd child, Ms. Butcher was furious to discover that Mr. Musk had recently fathered twins with Siobhan Zillis, an executive at his brain implant company Neuralink, according to people familiar with the situation. I don't know how you get people at your brain implant operation to agree to weird things like that, but it might have something to do with brain implants. Just wondering about that. You can answer that question better than I can, I guess. Mr. Musk was by then sounding an alarm with the world's declining birth rates, which would lead to the end of civilization, publicly encouraging people to have children and donating $10 million to a research initiative on population growth. Privately, he was spending time with Simone and Malcolm Collins, prominent figures in the emerging pro-natalist movement, and urging his wealthy friends to have as many children as possible. He believed the world needed more intelligent people, I don't know why he chose his friends, but, it's one of the faults people have, and not being able to see beyond themselves. Okay. That, according to people aware of the conversations, if you say, hi, Elon, good morning. Have more babies. Okay, that's a great conversation. Thank you. Mr. Collins declined to comment on his relationship with Mr. Musk, but said Elon is one of the people taking this cause seriously, which is a good reason to get rid of him, because it's not a cause that should be taken seriously. Even as Mr. Musk fathered more children, he favored his son X. By the fall of 2022, during a period when he and Ms. Bocher were broken up, he began traveling with the boy for days at a time, often without providing advance notice, according to people familiar with his actions. Ms. Bocher reconciled with Mr. Musk only to get another unpleasant surprise. In August of 2023, she learned that Ms. Zillis was expecting a third child with Mr. Musk via surrogacy and was pregnant with their fourth. So that's interesting. So not only is she pregnant again, but she's like, get somebody else pregnant so that I can have two babies at once and keep them both. She's a normal person. Ms. Bocher and Mr. Musk began a contentious custody battle during which Mr. Musk kept X for months. They eventually signed the joint custody agreement that specified keeping their children out of the spotlight. Okay, and they've done a great job in sticking by that one. By mid-2023, unknown to either Ms. Bocher or Ms. Zillis, ready for this one, Mr. Musk had started a romantic relationship with Ms. St. Clair, the writer, who lives in New York City. New York City? Well, what better place, I say. Ms. St. Clair said in an interview that at first, Mr. Musk told her he wasn't dating anyone else. He's full of surprises, isn't he? But when she was about 6 months pregnant, he acknowledged that he was romantically involved with Ms. Zillis, who went on to become a more visible fixture in Mr. Musk's life. So he was fooling multiple current women about one of his other women just all the time. I guess that's juggling, I guess. All right.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, so let's see. We were left off in the middle of this new profile about Elon Musk and his wild drug use and weirdo family situation. And lots of people have weirdo family situations, but this one's intentionally weirdo. Anyway, by the way, this picture then appears to illustrate the piece. I got maybe one of the few photos they had available of Ashley St. Clair, I guess. I don't know why they chose this one. She's at a party of some kind, some cocktail dresses and some formal wear visible. And I don't know what it is or where it is, and they don't identify it. But if I'm not mistaken, she's at a table there with a bunch of champagne glasses and cocktail glasses put there, and a couple of guys around in formal wear, black tie. And I think they don't identify him, but I think this is Madison Cawthorn. Remember him from briefly in Congress from North Carolina? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's him. That explains why he's down low. He would be in his wheelchair here, but the face is familiar. And I noticed he had a congressional lapel pin, like a floor access pin on, and I zoomed in to see what was the pin, and then I realized, I think I'm looking at A, a congressional pin, and B, Madison Cawthorn. I almost forgot about him. Anyway, you'll all remember that his big story before he was bounced out of Congress was, oh my God, they're all on drugs. Remember? And he used the phrase key bump. He's always seeing people doing key bumps of cocaine, and invited to all these parties, and that members of Congress are doing drugs and having orgies all over the place. I wonder if he was a source for any of this. Could have been, should have been, but he never should have been anywhere near government in the first place. Anyway, Ms. St. Clair said that Mr. Musk told her he had fathered children around the world, including one with a Japanese pop star. He said he would be willing to give his sperm, hi, good morning, everybody, to anyone who wanted to have a child. Like at Halloween, he was giving it out at his vials. And, kids, you don't have to use this right away, but if you're very young, great costume, put this in the freezer. And then later, I don't know. I'm not certain how he distributed it, but I have heard that said before. He made it seem like it was just his altruism. Oh, I thought like it was just his altruism. And he generally believed that these people should just have children, Ms. St. Clair said. And I guess he thought, well, all they're missing is sperm versus, the desire to have children, or it could be some other issue, or they don't want your children or something like that. That could stand in the way. What I thought was funny was, as I was reading it, he made it seem like it was just altruism, which is funny enough. But I read it as he made it seem like it was just his autism. Like, I offer my sperm to people because autism. Well, I don't know. I never heard of that. But okay. Sure. But it wasn't it anyway. So don't worry about it. Ms. St. Clair said that when she was in the delivery room giving birth in September, because when I can't even remember which delivery room it is. I have 900 children. When she was in a delivery room giving birth in September, Mr. Musk told her over disappearing signal messages that he wanted to keep his paternity and their relationship quiet. And that's an awesome time, by the way, to exert that leverage. When she's alone in a delivery room and he's somewhere else in the world, he's effed off to wherever. Look, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. I gave you the sperm. I'm done. P.S. Signal message you. This is the favor I'm asking of you. No. In between screams and ice chips. I'm just not interested in doing your bidding anymore. It's a bad time. Anyway, on election night, Ms. St. Clair and Mr. Musk both went to Mar-a-Lago to celebrate Mr. Trump's victory. That's why it's called Pervalago. But she had to pretend that she hardly knew him, she said. He offered her $15 million and $100,000 a month until their son turned 21 in exchange for her silence, according to documents reviewed by the Times and first reported by the Journal. But she did not want her son's paternity to be hidden. After she went, that's interesting that he didn't realize that. You have to hide the paternity. And, Ashley St. Clair seemed like she was pretty open about the other. I'm in this for a Musk baby. Like, that's the point. Anyway, after she went public in February ahead of a tabloid story, she sued Mr. Musk to acknowledge paternity and later to get emergency child support. Mr. Musk sought a gag order, claiming that any publicity involving the child or comments by Ms. St. Clair on her experience would be a security risk for the boy. No sympathy for this behavior is the next section. Some of Mr. Musk's one-time friends have aired concerns about what they considered toxic public behavior. In a January newsletter explaining why their friendship had ended, Sam Harris, a public intellectual, I didn't realize you could have that job, wrote that Mr. Musk had used his social media platform to defame people and promote lies. There is something seriously wrong with his moral compass, if not his perception of reality, Dr. Harris wrote. Later that, he's a doctor. More than a public intellectual, or maybe a PhD, but still, you can just be that. Later that month, at a Trump inauguration event, Mr. Musk thumped his chest and thrust his hand diagonally upward, resembling a fascist salute. I'm sure that's legal speaking. My heart goes out to you, he told the crowd. It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured, and boy, oh boy, is it not. Mr. Musk dismissed the resulting public outcry, saying he had made a positive gesture. Dr. Lowe, who is chief executive of Neurovigil, a neurotechnology company, was outraged by the performance. He wrote Mr. Musk a sharp email, shared it with the Times, cursing him, quote, for giving the Nazi salute. They put that in quotes so they could get that in there. When Mr. Musk didn't respond to the message, Dr. Lowe posted his concerns on social media. I have no sympathy for this behavior, he wrote on Facebook, referring to the gesture as well as to other behaviors. At some point, after having repeatedly confronted it in private, I believe the ethical thing to do is speak out forcefully and unapologetically. Or whatever the pronunciation of that word is. Okay, sorry. The next month, Mr. Musk once again found himself under scrutiny, this time for an appearance at the Conservative Political Action Conference outside Washington. As he walked onto the stage, he was handed a chainsaw from one of his political allies, Javier Milei, the president of Argentina. This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy, Mr. Musk shouted to the cheering crowd. Some conference organizers told the Times that they did not notice anything out of the ordinary about his behavior behind the scenes, but during an onstage interview, he spoke in disjointed bouts of stuttering and laughing with sunglasses on. Clips of it went viral as many viewers speculated about possible drug use. Guess what? They were pretty much right. Okay. So that's the end of this particular long piece on Elon Musk, but now I wanted to add to it. So keeping in mind that he was spending apparently most of his time on drugs. All right, everything is a little bit sluggish here, so we got to open up another version of Pocket so we can get to the opinion piece from Michelle Goldberg. What exactly was he doing all this time that he was possibly on drugs while working in the administration, right? Remember, I guess so far all they're willing to say at this point is that all of this stuff happened prior to his coming into the administration. Although the CPAC thing went on while he was in the administration. But I guess all the people who were sources to them about his drug use were saying, well, this was I saw during the campaign. But then the same behavior continued later on. I just didn't observe him consuming drugs during that time. Well, anyway, here's what he's doing with all of his time and extra energy from drugs. Elon Musk's legacy is disease, starvation, and death, says Michelle Goldberg, and she's right. There is an Elon Musk post on X, she begins, his social media platform, that should define his legacy. And the quote is, "We spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper," he wrote on February 3rd. He could have, quote, gone to some great parties, did that instead. He's very flippant about this. Musk's absurd scheme to save the government $1 trillion, and by the way, the scheme was to save the government $2 trillion. Once he got into the government, he immediately realized he'll make nothing close to $2 trillion out of it. So he pared it back to $1 trillion, which was still absurd and a completely ridiculous overestimate of what he was going to be able to do. Anyway, Musk's absurd scheme to save the government $1 trillion by slashing, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse has been a failure. Druggie claims it saved $175 billion, which is, of course, about, 98% short of what they were aiming for. But experts believe the real number is significantly lower, so 99% short of what they were looking for. Meanwhile, according to the Partnership for Public Service, which studies the federal workforce, Druggie's attack on government personnel, its firings, rehirings, use of paid administrative leave, and all the associated lack of productivity could cost the government upward of $135 billion this fiscal year. So they're claiming, and I think they're lying, savings of $175 billion, but they have costs of $135 billion just this year. So it's pretty likely a wash or even a loss in dollar terms alone before we even get to the rest of it. So this all could cost the government upward of $135 billion this fiscal year, even before the price of defending Druggie's actions in court. So there's no way there's any savings here. They're going to end up losing money on the money they spend on defending things in court. Musk's rampage through the bureaucracy may not have created any savings at all, and if it did, they were negligible. Now, Musk's Washington adventure is coming to an end, with the disillusioned billionaire announcing that he's leaving government behind. It sure is an uphill battle trying to improve things in D.C., to say the least, he told the Washington Post. Now, just a pause here to tell you, every serious person in the world could have told you this is an enormously difficult task. If it was not, it would have been done. Everybody and their mother has tried this already. Seriously, less seriously, offhandedly, intentionally, it is very difficult to do, especially if you actually care at all about the impact of that effort and the people who will lose their jobs, the people who will lose access to the services provided by the people who lost their jobs. And of course, he cares not at all about any of that. And that's the real thrust of this piece, as I understand it. Now, with the adventure coming to an end, right? This is his exit interview. Sure is an uphill battle. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the different attempts they've had to rein in spending. Rego, right? Reinventing government, Al Gore's thing, slashing of all sorts of bureaucracy and services of all kinds during Reagan administration, Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, the welfare to work things under Clinton, the Simpson-Bowles Commission, the super committee, imposing across the board sequestrations. I mean, think about all of the efforts that have been put into this thing and where they've gotten with it. But no, Elon Musk, rocket ships, I'm a super genius. Total idiot, total naive, and incompetent to even the tasks at which he's supposedly famous at succeeding. But I'm going to fix government and take drugs and play video games all day. Yeah, it's totally going to happen. There is one place, however, where Mr. Musk, with the help of his minions, and I should say his millions, but it's now billions, hundreds of billions, achieved his goals. There was, really. He did indeed shred USAID, though a rump operation is now operating inside the State Department, and the administration says that it has terminated more than 80% of USAID grants. Brooke Nichols, an associate professor of global health at Boston University, and it's linked here for this one, has estimated that these cuts have already resulted in about 300,000 deaths, most of them of children, and will lead likely to significantly more by the end of the year. That is what Musk's foray into politics accomplished, right? Cutting off all those USAID food contracts and medical assistance contracts and clinics and hospitals and everything. 300,000 deaths already. Many more to come by the end of this year. But he's gone. He's back to concentrating on business, everybody. 300,000 deaths. Now, I have a lot to express about that, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all of it across. But I did say this morning, as soon as I saw this excerpt, Michelle was circulating this herself on Blue Sky, this particular excerpt. Kind of grabbed the attention, don't you think? So let's see. On the one hand, the first thing that occurred to me was, you hear every once in a while about people like Elon Musk or people who have this kind of money. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, a few others, right? People frequently say things like, well, these multi-billionaires, they could end world hunger if they wanted to, and for only a fraction of their money, right? They'd still have billions and billions to play with, but they could end world hunger. Just pay for it out of pocket, but they never do. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Back to the first thing we mentioned in the program, logistics. They're tough. That's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, it's a laudable goal, and it's probably possible, but it's not just throw money at it. Although I guess if you threw even more money at it, you could throw money first at people who do this stuff and are in fact competent to the task of delivering food worldwide, the right kind of food, the right places to distribute it, the right ways to distribute it, the right ways of navigating the bureaucracy. I mean, what does it take to get food that will save people from starvation onto the ground in some of the most desolate places around? in the middle of civil wars, typically, like all of this stuff, and to not pick up infectious disease while you have people distributing it. It's enormously difficult, I'm sure. But with billions and billions of dollars, you could do it, right? Well, this is where it becomes interesting. Elon Musk not only chose not to use his billions to work toward ending global hunger, he actually chose to put his billions to work stopping the people who are, in fact, working on that from doing it. The people who actually do have the expertise to figure out what kind of food is necessary, how do we procure it, from where, how do I get it onto planes, on pallets, shipped to Africa, shipped to wherever it's needed, Asia, anywhere in the world that it's needed, get it on the ground, deal with the local government and bureaucracy, protect ourselves from any raging civil wars and illnesses, and distribute it in ways that don't cause panics and stampedes and don't overload people's digestive systems when they've been starving, and give them the attendant medical care that they need. All the people who have worked out those logistics. This guy's exploding rockets and launching cars into space, taking ketamine. I think his big achievement was putting a gigantic video screen in an historic ceremonial office in the old executive office building so he could play video games on a big screen while he wrecked people's lives here in D.C., but murdered the rest of them around the 300,000 deaths. Not only did he not choose to put his billions to work to end world hunger, he put his billions to work to stop people who had any inkling whatsoever of how to address the problem of world hunger, and fire them and have them sitting on their hands at home, and food that was available for people who were starving to death, rotting in warehouses. That's what he spent his money on. And that, let's talk to the new Pope. That, I think, I'm not a theologian, but I think that's why people imagine the concept of hell. That's who's supposed to burn there, I think. I'm not positive. The logistics of hell are probably quite complicated as well. Balancing the end result of people's lives, I guess above my pay grade, but I would say I'd like to forward this case file on for further consideration. I think it warrants it. This is not good, right? And by the way, 300,000 deaths. It's May still. It's not quite June, so we're like 5 months into this thing. 300,000 deaths. I want to remind you, I don't know if it's fair to compare anything. I don't want to get into that part of the discussion of it. But I think we're looking at 50,000, I suppose, dead in Gaza. Where are my genocide Joe must go chants and people? Where's genocide anything for Elon Musk, Donald Trump? Now, we knew that Gaza was going to get worse. Even people who were enthusiastic about screaming genocide Joe chants probably knew Gaza was going to get worse. And it did. And it will get worse still. And it's because of Trump. Yes. But it's amazing that we've totally blind-eyed a death situation 10 or more times higher than what's going on in Gaza. And like, oh, USAID, he ruined USAID. We're mad about the people who lost their jobs working on these noble causes. 300,000 people dead is, I don't know. I wasn't talking about it. Don't look at me. I wasn't any better than the rest of you. But I'm curious, like, what's the chant? What's the genocide something about Elon Musk or Donald Trump or both of them for that matter? I used to say during the first administration and then afterwards about our losses to COVID and the way Trump intentionally bungled the whole thing and made it impossible to recover from it, without further losses during the Biden administration. Yes, that history would demand to know why we didn't hang Trump, why the American people didn't drag him out of the White House. What are you doing telling people to drink poisons and inject bleach and maybe put light bulbs where they don't belong. And holy mackerel, like the things he was doing, sabotaging our health for generations. Why didn't we do something about it? And no one knows, and I don't know if we can fully ever explain it. But here, what? Elon Musk's thing killed 300,000 people, and he's returning to his businesses. He wants to spend more time with his family. He's walking off into the sunset. History will demand to know why we let that happen. History will demand to know a lot of things about what's going on. And there's another story I have to connect to all of this. We'll come back to it later. This concept perhaps once again later on. But yeah, no, I haven't heard. I mean, maybe because, I don't know, it doesn't rhyme, or Elon is two syllables. But, Musk... Genocide Musk, it's not alliterative, I guess. Genocide Joe, I don't know. I don't think any of most of those people are probably not fully sincere in the purity of their motives, I don't think, because otherwise you would see them saying, hey, 300,000, that's more. We're mad about that. But you don't. But there's various reasons behind that. I just wanted to put that out there. We'll let Michelle finish up here. White House officials deny that their decimation of USAID has had fatal consequences, but they're liars, so what are you going to do about it? At a hearing in the House last week, Democrats confronted Secretary of State Marco Rubio with my colleague Nick Kristoff's reporting from East Africa, documenting, suffering and death caused by the withdrawal of aid. Rubio insisted no such deaths have happened, but people who've been in the field say he's either lying or misinformed. Well, just like RFK Jr. We didn't fire those people. Yes, he did. We didn't stop that, that program. Yes, he did. We didn't block that vaccine. Yeah, you did. Atul Gawande, an assistant administrator for global health at USAID in Joe Biden's administration, told me that during a trip to Kenya last week, he visited the National Referral Hospital. I don't know what that is, but there you go. And it's not capitalized here, so I'm confused. It's not the title of the place. The National Referral Hospital. Anyway, there's been a major increase in the number of patients with advanced HIV symptoms, a result of losing access to antiretroviral medication. That was USAID. At refugee camps on the border of South Sudan, where we're now deporting people to, food aid has been cut so severely that people are getting less than 30% of the calories that they need. It's not enough to survive on, and that has caused skyrocketing levels of severe malnutrition and deaths associated with it, said Gawande. Musk apparently did not anticipate that it would be bad PR for the world's richest man to take food and medicine from the world's poorest children because of what a genius he is. The Neuralink thing in his brain didn't help him process that for some reason. The Post reported that he hadn't foreseen the intensity of the blowback to his role in politics over the past year. He's been doing a series of interviews that Axios called an image rehab tour. 300,000 dead, that's a lot of rehab. If there were justice in the world, and there's every indication that there is not, but if there was justice in the world, Musk would never be able to repair his reputation, at least not without devoting the bulk of his fortune to easing the misery he's engendered. Musk's sojourn in government has revealed severe flaws in his character, a blithe, dehumanizing cruelty, and a deadly incuriosity. This should shape how he's seen for the rest of his public life. Musk sometimes refers to people he holds in contempt as NPCs. That's video game speak for characters, non-player characters. Characters who aren't controlled by players and thus have no agency. They're the other filler characters in a video game in which you wander through, and they just walk around. They're extras on the set, essentially. More than just an insult. The term, I think, reveals something about his worldview. He either doesn't view most other people as entirely real, or doesn't see the point of treating them as such. As he told Joe Rogan this year, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, referring to the emotion as a bug in our system. Yet, even as he prides himself on dispassionate rigor, Musk has proved remarkably uninterested in figuring out how the government that he sought to transform really works. Samantha Power, head of USAID under Biden, told me she tried to speak with members of the new administration, hoping to convince them that there were elements of USAID's work that they could leverage for their own agenda. But aside from one meeting with transition officials, her outreach was ignored. Instead, Musk seems to derive his view of the agency from conspiracy theorists on X. And we don't mean on ecstasy, although that's probably true also. There, he called USAID a radical left political psyop and amplified a post from the right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos, who should be, socially dead for a decade already by now, smearing it as the most gigantic global terror organization in history. They just love saying the most outrageous stuff they can make up. They're terrorists. And their absence has caused 300,000 deaths. It's a weird kind of terrorism. It would have been easy for Musk to take his private plane to a country like Uganda to see for himself the work USAID has done, providing medicine to people with HIV or feeding refugees from South Sudan. And that is an excellent point. Even if he didn't commit any of his funds to alleviating that suffering, he could have had the answer himself. That's a very Elon Musk-y thing to do. Who can really tell for sure? Who has the resources to get on my private plane and fly to these places and see for themselves? I do. But instead, ketamine party. Let's play video games. That is really rather remarkable. So instead, though, he drew on the counsel of internet trolls and staffed druggie with lackeys who were similarly ignorant. If you heard the conversations USAID staff had with the druggie people, there is no word in any language that captures the level of obliviousness about what USAID actually did, said Power. That is a remarkably powerful statement from Power. This kind of intellectual carelessness should make people reevaluate their faith in Musk's brilliance. Being president doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are, Michelle Obama has said. The same is true, apparently, of being the president's best friend, even fleetingly. So yes, this is really something to consider here. Should he be allowed to ride off into the sunset, or should there be a clever nickname for his genocide that people bandy about? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've just realized that I, in my fervor, put on the 2-minute break music when I needed to put on the 1-minute break music, and then neglected to come back. So hi. Well, I don't know. We'll fix all of this later on. And something. So you enjoy the special collector's item edition of the live show. That concludes the opinion piece from Michelle Goldberg, but it leads us to down another path, and I'm going to have to open up yet another pocket here, I think. Something's going on with the New York Times connection and all of this. But also of some interest this morning, and I think last evening too. Where have I got this one parked? I don't know why this one is so difficult to find. I thought I'm also finding, I guess maybe as Pocket is winding down, I'm finding fewer and fewer of the things that I think I'm marking for Pocket and I'm told are successfully marked for Pocket inclusion are actually showing up the next morning. So I got to go searching for this one, but I think if I scroll back in Blue Sky, I'll find more about. I'll find it in my own posts over the last couple of days, hours, I guess. But yeah, let me just, hold on while I scroll here. There was a lot about the Elon Musk stuff this morning, but just before I got to that, here we are. I happened to see this story making the rounds, and this is ProPublica. And why didn't this make why I didn't get this into Pocket, I'm not sure, but somewhere in here is an actual link to the story. And I'll just open it up so that I can share this story with you too. But the commentary I was looking for, this was a ProPublica story under the headline, Trump administration knew vast majority of Venezuelans sent to Salvadoran prison had not been convicted of U.S. crimes. The subheader here reads, Homeland Security records reveal that officials knew that more than half of the 238 deportees were labeled as having no criminal record in the U.S. and had only violated immigration laws, nothing else, right? And I guess this accounts for the dissociation, I guess, among some parts of the voting population who supported Trump. I thought we were going after the criminals. I thought that meant we were going after the gang members and the dangerous people, if there even were any. I don't know. But it became clear right away that Stephen Miller was just interested in deporting the Brown, period. And it had nothing to do with criminal activity. And to the extent that they felt he needed to justify himself, he just said, yeah, we are deporting criminals, just like we said, people who violated our immigration laws. That makes them criminals. But it actually specifically is not a criminal violation to violate immigration laws. So that was a lie right from the get-go. But, standing around while you're killing 300,000 people in Africa and saying, well, technically this should be a civil charge is not where we're going to end up spending our attention. And along with all the rest of the rhetoric, not only is immigration not only we're going to lie and say it's a criminal violation of the law, but we're going to say that it's terrorism and an invasion to boot, so that we can get the justification we need to use laws that should not be applied here at all to bypass everything else and deport people this way. So what they're saying here is 238 people or so deported, Venezuelans deported to El Salvador and locked up in this ridiculous prison, and almost none of them had any criminal records. So it's a big, huge lie. And I just wanted to point out that this would, of course, happen in Donald Trump's world and on Donald Trump's watch, because Donald Trump has a long record of letting his paranoid white panic style dictate his output here. And now, unfortunately, his output here, it has policy implications because he's allegedly been elected president of the United States. If he didn't forge the, electoral college votes this time. I have no reason to believe he did. I'm just pointing out that he tried to last time. Anyway, whatever. There's really no point in limiting yourself here in your discussion of what Trump is up to. Like, it used to be considered weird insane conspiracy theory thinking to stand here and say, yeah, he faked the vote. Well, I mean, it used to be crazy to accuse somebody of running for president and forging electoral college votes. But he did do that. It did not work last time. But, as you stand here and say, well, there's no evidence that he tampered with the vote in any way or that anybody else tampered with the vote on his behalf in order to allegedly elect him president this time around, even though we're having all sorts of difficulty figuring out, well, where did the people come from who voted for him? We see the votes that are there. They must have been people who never voted before, but totally voted this time. And even though he was elected with fewer popular votes cast for him than the losers of previous elections, I don't know. I have no evidence that it happened the other way. Yeah. You don't. But I was also pointing out this morning on Blue Sky, and we haven't gotten to this story on the air yet, but you have doubtless seen the various stories of vaccine development being stopped in its tracks. In particular, I know that I got to make a note to go grab you. Got to make a note to make a pencil available to myself in order to make these notes. But okay, no pencil here. But and I'm responsible for my own summary today too, so I won't even have Scott to remind me, hey, where's this thing? All right, well, trying really hard here to make a mental note. Moderna has new vaccines in development, and I'm a little bit, it's a little blurry as to which one is getting blocked here, but with RFK Jr. at the head of HHS, we have an end to the recommendation for the general population to get new COVID boosters, perhaps in the development of them being blocked or discouraged by actions from HHS. No further work on the possibility of coming up with vaccines in case the avian bird flu breaks out into the human population in general. Just making all the wrong decisions. And it's got a very, Night to Remember, Titanic sinking / Guns of August, World War I feel to it. Like, oh boy, you have no idea the mistakes you're making and the trouble you're walking into. If only people had seen this. And yet they're doing it. And I was just sort of, thinking about like the Moderna thing. Like, why wouldn't you allow, just thinking about when Trump was president and COVID set in and he had the sense somehow, someone talked him into, you should be spearheading a major effort to try and find a vaccine faster than anyone has ever found it before. We're breaking all kinds of records like no one has ever seen before. Right up his alley. And then he did it, and then he tried to claim credit for it, and he had primed his crowds to boo him for it, and that was the end of that. And anyway, I guess as conspiracy thinking goes, I also was thinking this morning, it used to be insane conspiracy thinking to say something like, what if the President of the United States of America is standing in the way of development of this new vaccine until he gets a cut of the profits? I'm not going to approve the work on or use of this vaccine unless you put down that, the Trump organization gets X percent of the profits from the sale of this vaccine. Well, no, that's insane. Everybody's going to see right through it. They know you didn't do any work on this thing. It's going to be facially corrupt. Everyone's going to see it. I don't care. Then don't do the vaccine. But then people will die. I don't care. Money for me or nothing. I don't care what the consequences are. That was insane. You can't say that. Can you now say that you can't say that? I was just wondering what you thought about something like that. Okay, that's not what the subject of this next article is. I want to read you this ProPublica thing because that brings me to another thing. Trump in charge of policy and bringing his, as I said before, paranoid white panic ideas about public policy, bringing them to the presidency. You take the guy who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of the Central Park Five, right? Who then later exonerated by scientific DNA evidence. He wanted them executed. Science proved they didn't commit this crime, but he wanted them dead anyway. And then even after that, he said, science doesn't even work. They should have executed them anyhow. You take a guy like that and put him in charge of immigration, you are going to get yargle bargle, worst of the worst, gang, rape, murder, emptying their prisons. And it's going to turn out that none of them are criminals. And this is what you're going to get. On top of genocide in Africa, but widely distributed. And so, for some reason, not getting that much attention. Trump administration knew that the vast majority of Venezuelans sent to the Salvadoran prison had not been convicted of U.S. crimes, chose to lie and pretend that they did anyway. And here's how it's reported by ProPublica. And there are a lot of people involved in this one. Are we ready for this one? And not all of them are going to be easy pronunciations. Micah Rosenberg at ProPublica. And you know how they partner with newsrooms around the world when they need to get stories with boots on the ground. This is another such thing. So for ProPublica, Micah Rosenberg, Perla Treviso, who's also working at the Texas Tribune on all of this. Next, Melissa Sanchez and Gabriel Sandoval, ProPublica. Rona Risquez, Alianza Rebelde Investiga. Wow, okay, Rebelde, like that. And Adrian Gonzalez from Cazadores de Fake News. I'm going to have to look up what Cazadores means, but that sounds kind of funny. But okay, long list of people contributing to this thing, and that's important. Co-published with the Texas Tribune and the other outlets, Alianza Rebelde Investiga, was a Rebel Investigative Alliance, and Cazadores de Fake News. I'd love to find out more about that one. We'll do it later. Here's the deal. The Trump administration knew that the vast majority of the 238 Venezuelan immigrants it sent to a maximum security prison in El Salvador, with apparently no hope of ever getting out, in mid-March, or ever, but that's when they were sent there. I know, I cut it off at the wrong time. They had not been convicted of crimes in the United States before it labeled them as terrorists and deported them. According to U.S. Department of Homeland Security data, that has not been previously reported. President Donald Trump and his aides have branded the Venezuelans as rapists, savages, monsters, the worst of the worst. That's what they say about them. When multiple news organizations disputed those assertions with reporting that showed that many of the deportees did not have criminal records, the administration doubled down. You know that. It said that its assessment of the deportees was based on a thorough vetting process that included looking at crimes committed both inside and outside the United States. But the government's own data, which was obtained by ProPublica, the Texas Tribune, and a team of journalists from Venezuela, showed that officials knew that only 32 of the deportees had been convicted of U.S. crimes and that most were nonviolent offenses at that, such as retail theft or traffic violations or killing 300,000 people while on ketamine, right? Where is the full-page ad in the New York Times calling for Elon Musk's execution? I have not seen it. We won't. But maybe I could become president 30 years hence from doing that. But then I'll be 100 years old. But that's okay. The data indicates that the government knew that only 6 of the immigrants were convicted of violent crimes. 4 for assault, 1 for kidnapping, which is what's happening to them anyway, so what's the big deal? And 1 for a weapons offense. So for all the rapists, murderers, terrorists, monsters, the worst of the worst. There's not a murder among them, or a rape, by the way, 2 of the crimes specifically mentioned in all this hate mongering. But no. It also shows that officials were aware that more than half, or 130 of the deportees, were not labeled as having any criminal convictions or pending charges. They were labeled only as having violated immigration laws. As for foreign offenses, our own review of court and police records from around the United States and in Latin American countries where the deportees had lived found evidence of arrests or convictions for 20 of the 238 men. Of those, 11 involved violent crimes such as armed robbery, assault, or murder, including 1 man who the Chilean government, had asked the U.S. to extradite to face kidnapping and drug charges there. So they're actually asking for him back. That guy we managed to deport. But where do we send him? El Salvador? Another 4 had been accused of illegal gun possession, which is actually will get you a Congressional Medal of Honor here in the United States, apparently. Or, Presidential Medal of Freedom. We conducted a case-by-case review of all the Venezuelan deportees. It's possible there are crimes and other information in the deportees' backgrounds that did not show up in our reporting or in the internal governmental data, which includes only minimal details for 9 of the men. There's no single publicly available database for all crimes committed in the U.S., much less abroad. But everything we did find in public records contradicted the Trump administration's assertions as well. So, okay, logistics, they're tough. I understand. ProPublica and the Tribune, along with Venezuelan media outlets Cazadores de Fake News, that's, thank you, translation, fake news hunters, Cazadores, hunters, and Alianza Rebelde Investiga, Rebel Alliance Investigates. Okay, thanks for the translations. Well, ProPublica and these outlets also obtained lists of alleged gang members that are kept by Venezuelan law enforcement officials and the international law enforcement agency Interpol. Those lists include some 1,400 names. None of the names of the 238 Venezuelan deportees matched those on the lists. The hasty removal of the Venezuelans and their incarceration in a third country has made this one of the most consequential deportations in recent history. The court battles over whether Trump has the authority to expel immigrants without judicial review have the potential to upend how this country handles all immigrants living in the U.S., whether legally or illegally. Officials have suggested publicly that to achieve the president's goals of deporting millions of immigrants, the administration was considering suspending habeas corpus, the long-standing constitutional right allowing people to challenge their detention. And can I just clarify for a moment? It is a constitutional right. It is enshrined in the Constitution too, but it wasn't invented by or for the purposes of drafting our Constitution. It is a long-standing right of English common law, as people say, traced back to the Magna Carta. There's hundreds and hundreds, almost 1,000 years of legal precedent involved in this. And Kristi Noem has had 1,000 years to study it and still hasn't figured it out. Hours before the immigrants were loaded onto airplanes in Texas for deportation, the Trump administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, declaring that the Tren de Aragua prison gang had invaded the United States, aided by the Venezuelan government. It branded the gang a foreign terrorist organization and said that that declaration gave the president the authority to expel its members and send them indefinitely into a foreign prison where they've remained for more than 2 months with no ability to communicate with their families or lawyers. Lee Gellert, the lead attorney in the American Civil Liberties Union's legal fight against the deportations, said the removals amounted to blatant violations of the most fundamental due process principles. He said that under the law, an immigrant who has committed a crime can be prosecuted and removed, but it does not mean they can be subjected to a potentially lifetime sentence in a foreign gulag. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson said in response to our findings that ProPublica should be embarrassed that they are doing the bidding of criminal illegal aliens who are a threat. They're not criminal. They're not illegal aliens. They're not threats. But you should be embarrassed. Adding that the American people strongly support the president's immigration agenda. Though, again, as Greg has pointed out 100 times, if you tell them what's going on, they don't. When asked about the differences between the administration's public statements about the deportees and the way they were labeled in government data, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin largely repeated previous public statements. She insisted, without providing evidence, that the deportees were dangerous, saying these individuals categorized as non-criminals are actually terrorists, human rights abusers, gang members, and more, and they just don't have a rap sheet in the U.S. As for the administration's allegations that Tren de Aragua had attempted an invasion, an analysis by U.S. intelligence officials concluded that the gang was not acting at the direction of the Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro, and that reports suggesting otherwise were not credible. Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's director of national intelligence, fired the report's authors after it became public. Her office, according to news reports, said Gabbard was trying to end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community. Our investigation focused on the 238 Venezuelan men who were deported in March to CECOT, March 15th specifically, the prison in El Salvador, and whose names were on a list first published by CBS News. The government has also sent several dozen other immigrants there, including Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran man who the government admitted was sent there in error. Courts have ruled that the administration should facilitate his return to the U.S. We interviewed about 100 of the deportees' relatives and their attorneys. Many of them had heard from their loved ones on the morning of March 15th, when the men believed they were being sent back to Venezuela. They were happy because they would be back home with their families, who were eager to prepare their favorite meals and plan parties. Some of the relatives shared video messages with us and on social media that were recorded inside U.S. detention facilities. In those videos, the detainees said that they were afraid they might be sent to Guantanamo, a U.S. facility on Cuban soil where Washington has held and tortured detainees, including a number that it suspected of plotting the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The Trump administration had sent planes carrying Venezuelan immigrants there earlier this year. They had no idea they were being sent to El Salvador. Among them was 31-year-old Leonardo Jose Colmenares. Oh, sorry, there's another name here. Leonardo Jose Colmenares Soloranzo, who left Venezuela and his job as a youth soccer coach last year. His sister, Ladies, L-E-I-D-Y-S, Ladies Trejo Soloranzo, said he had a hard time supporting himself and his mother and that Venezuela's crumbling economy made it hard for him to find a better paying job. Colmenares was detained at an appointment to approach the U.S.-Mexico border in October because of his many tattoos his sister said. Those tattoos include the names of relatives, a clock, an owl, and a crown that she said was inspired by the Real Madrid soccer club's logo. Colmenares was not flagged as having any criminal history in the DHS data we obtained, nor did we find any U.S. or foreign convictions or charges in our review. Trejo said her brother stayed out of trouble and has no criminal record in Venezuela either. She described his expulsion as a U.S. government-sponsored kidnapping. It's been so difficult. Even talking about what happened is hard for me, said Trejo, who has scoured the internet for videos and photos of her brother in the Salvadoran prison. Many nights I can't sleep because I'm so anxious. The internal government data shows that officials had labeled all but a handful of the men as members of Tren de Aragua, but offered little information about how they came to that conclusion. Court filings and documents we obtained show the government has relied in part on social media posts, affiliations with known gang members, and tattoos, including crowns, clocks, guns, grenades, and Michael Jordan's Jumpman logo. Sure, why not? We found that at least 158 of the Venezuelans imprisoned in El Salvador have tattoos, but law enforcement sources in the U.S., Colombia, Chile, and Venezuela with expertise in the Tren de Aragua gang told us that tattoos are not even an indicator of gang membership there. McLaughlin, the DHS spokesperson, said the agency is confident in its assessments of gang affiliation, but would not provide additional information to support them. Why are they so confident? The president who leads them was confident that he should execute or call for the execution of people who were, at the time, appeared to be guilty of a certain crime, but were later proven not to have been the perpetrators, and he still wanted them executed. Isn't he a genius? John Sandweg, a former acting director of immigration, director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, said, "For political reasons, I think the administration wants to characterize this as a grand effort that's promoting public safety in the United States. But even some of the government's own data demonstrates there's a gap between the rhetoric and the reality," he said, referring to the internal data we obtained. The government data showed 67 men who were deported had been flagged as having pending charges, though it provides no details about their alleged crimes. We found police, court, and other records for 38 of those deportees. We found several people whose criminal history differed from what was tagged in the government data. In some cases, the government listed as pending criminal charges. The men had been convicted, and in one case, the charge had been dropped before the man was deported. Our reporting found that, like criminal convictions, the majority of pending charges involved non-violent crimes, including retail theft, drug possession, and traffic offenses. And drug possession should just get you hired by Dodgy at this point. 6 of the men had pending charges for attempted murder, assault, armed robbery, gun possession, or domestic battery. Immigrant advocates have said removing people to a prison in El Salvador before their cases against them were resolved means that Trump, asserting his executive authority, short-circuited the criminal justice system. That's certainly true. Take the case of Wilker Miguel Gutierrez Sierra, 23, who was arrested in February of 2024 in Chicago on charges of attempted murder, robbery, and aggravated battery after he and 3 other Venezuelan men allegedly assaulted a stranger on a train and stole his phone and $400. Well, he pleaded not guilty. Gutierrez was on electronic monitoring as he awaited trial when he was arrested by ICE agents who pulled up to him on the street in 5 black trucks, court records show. 3 days later, shipped to El Salvador. But the majority of men labeled as having pending cases were facing less serious charges, according to the records we found. Michael Gabriel Lopez Lizano, also 23, was arrested in Chicago in August of 2023 on misdemeanor charges for riding his bike on the sidewalk while drinking a can of Budweiser. His partner, Cherry Flores, described his deportation as a gross injustice. They shouldn't have sent him there, she said. Why did they have to take him? Over a beer. Well, dangerous, worst of the worst, right? Obviously true. All right. Well, all very interesting, but even more interesting, I think, in the context of the other egregious offenses by both Elon Musk and ultimately Donald Trump, who's responsible, allegedly, for anything, ever, for all of this stuff. And just a continuation of this weird policy that he thinks he can perpetrate with impunity of just sentencing people to life imprisonment, exile, or even death based on his whims. The Central Park 5 guy has been put in charge of the criminal justice system in this country, and we knew he was incompetent to the task in 1989. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and here we have once again just one segment left to teach you everything there is to know in the world. It's not me, it's everybody else doing all the reporting. I'm just sharing the stories. I'm curating, I guess that's a thing. But wow, where do we go after all of this? I don't know. There's no way to keep up this momentum, but there are a lot of other things that have got to get on the record. I found a pencil during the break, so I got myself a note to get the vaccine stories so that we have the actual news before us, at least for the summary. But I think we got it generally right. I mentioned yesterday another story that should concern everybody, and there are so many. And I've got some other suggestions from those of you listening for some other things that really need attention. Never going to get to it all, but we'll give it a shot. But this is something I mentioned yesterday, so follow up from Politico. Trump nominates Emil Bove. Remember him? The guy who looks like, I don't know, Igor or something from a Frankenstein movie. I don't know. He's a very, I don't know what, laconic. Is that a right word? He's a very interesting looking individual, to say the least. But that's not what this is about. We're worried about his actions. And when he's out there, we really have to try to stop it. Trump nominates Emil Bove, his DOJ enforcer, and former, we should add, personal criminal defense lawyer, to be a federal judge. That shouldn't surprise anybody, but it should worry people because, he's got a record of his actions previously in government. In 4 months as a senior Justice Department official, Bove overhauled the department to suit Trump's demands. And that's sane washing all by itself, just saying overhaul the department. Basically, right, long story short on this is the guy who said, drop the charges against Eric Adams or you're fired, and then, in fact, had to fire or witness the resignation of numerous people from the Southern District of New York rather than comply with his ridiculous demands. And the reward for that is they're going to put him on a circuit court. It was the Third Circuit that he was nominated to. So, huge abuses of law and process by Trump perpetrated at his direction by Emil Bove, and then they're going to make him the judge of whether or not all this stuff was illegal. And guess what? He'll probably rule that it wasn't. Anyway, Erica Orden reporting this for Politico. Trump on Wednesday nominated Emil Bove, one of his closest and most truculent legal allies, to serve as a judge on a federal appeals court. Bove previously was one of Trump's top criminal defense attorneys, and for the past 4 months As a senior official of the Justice Department, he's implemented Trump's demands for aggressive immigration enforcement, as well as retaliation against prosecutors and FBI agents who worked on January 6th cases. This is the guy, right? Emil is smart, tough, and respected by everyone, Trump wrote in announcing the pick on Truth Social. He will end the weaponization of justice, restore the rule of law, and do anything else that is necessary to make America great again. And he added, Emil Bove will never let you down. If confirmed by the Senate, Bove will fill a vacancy on the Philadelphia-based Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Bove, 44, is currently the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, a top Justice Department post in which he oversees all of the department's operations. He overhauled the department's strategy on immigration, redeploying anti-terrorism squads. Oh, really, I guess calling them terrorism squads is right. Redeploying anti-terrorism squads toward immigration enforcement and ordering the prosecution of state and local officials who obstruct federal immigration authorities. This is another story in Pocket today about that stuff and redirecting anti-terrorism investigators inside the Department of Justice to this task. And that's part of the reason that they need to be able to label immigrants as terrorists. That helps them justify the redeployment of all these resources. But all right, let's continue with this story. Right. Bove has earned a reputation as an aggressive and often indelicate manager, most notably for his dismantling of the criminal case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Bove ordered the Manhattan federal prosecutors handling the corruption case against the Democratic mayor to drop it, suggesting the charges were politically motivated and saying the prosecution was interfering with Adams' ability to carry out Trump's immigration agenda. By the way, there's a hell of a political motive. Democrat Joe Biden so corrupt that he charged Democrat Eric Adams with federal crimes, but we're going to save him from the politicization. Okay, sure, whatever. Anyway, acting. Oh yeah, but where are we? Acting Manhattan U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon, once a friend of Bove's, refused to do so, instead resigning in protest along with several other prosecutors in New York and Washington. In her resignation letter, Sassoon accused Bove of entering a quid pro quo with Adams. And what's the name of that New York Times reporter who said, no, if there's no quid pro quo, it's not corruption. Well, here's an accusation of a quid pro quo, or quid pro quo anyway. Not the quid quo quo that I just said. And when U.S. District Judge Dale Ho finally agreed to dismiss the case, he sharply criticized every rationale Bove had presented for abandoning it. And now, of course, that would have been New York, and he's the second. It works in the Second Circuit, although he's the district court judge there in New York, Daniel Ho. But that would be interesting if then you're talking about all of your arguments are garbage. Get out of my courtroom. Oh, now you're my boss. Shoot. Well, luckily, he's being placed on a different circuit. Although it's not lucky at all. Bove's actions roiled other parts of the Justice Department as well. Shortly after taking office, he accused FBI leadership of insubordination for failing to turn over the names of Washington, D.C. based agents and employees who oversaw the investigation of the January 6th Capitol riot. And a memo Bove wrote formed the basis for the firings of dozens of prosecutors who worked on January 6th cases. And if there was ever a case against the claims of the deep state, and they assassinated Kennedy because he got too close to firing all of these investigators and FBI agents and intelligence officers, et cetera, and nobody's in any danger of, being disappeared or assassinated, it seems. It's very odd that motivation didn't materialize in anything or didn't manifest itself in any way, as far as we know. Bove's short fuse came as no surprise to those who had worked with him earlier in his career at the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office, where he co-led the Terrorism and International Narcotics Unit. In that role, he was criticized and nearly demoted, too bad they didn't do it, for his bellicose leadership style. You just can't fail downward anymore with these guys. Before Trump's re-election last year, Bove defended him at his criminal trial in Manhattan, where he was, how'd he do as a defense attorney? The worst you could possibly do. He was convicted of all 34 state felony counts of business fraud. Trump is appealing that conviction, but it's the only sense in which he's appealing. And Bove represented Trump in the 2 federal criminal cases against him, both of which were dropped after Trump won the presidential election. See, I guess you could say he did better there, but he never made an argument. Bove worked closely on those cases with Todd Blanche, who is now the Deputy Attorney General, a position that makes him Bove's direct boss at the Justice Department. Moments after Trump nominated Bove for the judgeship, Blanche praised his colleague's work. I've known Emil for years and his dedication to this country, along with his integrity. Do you really care? But he ends up with a well-earned, my friend, and it's not. And he shouldn't be your friend. Okay. Other stories I'm going to have to shoehorn in here. This will come probably as no surprise, but I think a relative quickie from Government Executive magazine, govexec.com. But I got to click through some pop-ups to get to it. I saw this one excerpted in a Blue Sky post. The longer post, though, provides more context. OPM, quote, merit hiring. The OPM merit hiring plan includes bipartisan reforms. That sounds okay. And a politicized new test. Oh, I thought we were getting rid of the politicization. No, apparently not. The federal government's HR agency on Thursday instructed agencies to cease collecting data on the demographic makeup of their workforces, because that's DEI. Can't have that. But there's more. Eric Wagner, or Eric Wagner, perhaps, because it's ERICH. Reports this story for Government Executive. Federal job applicants will soon be quizzed, ready for this, on their favorite Trump administration policy as part of the hiring process, according to the Office of Personnel Management's new merit hiring plan. Ready for the question? How would you help advance the president's executive orders and policy priorities in this role? Asks one of 4 essay questions that job seekers must answer if they are seeking any federal position GS5 or above. And that's pretty low level. So that's pretty much everybody in any policy position. Identify 1 or 2 relevant executive orders or policy initiatives that are significant to you and explain how you would help implement them if hired. That's very odd. The federal government's executive orders? Really? The federal government's dedicated HR agency published the plan via a joint memo from Vince Haley, director of President Trump's Domestic Policy Council, and what else? Who else was involved? Acting OPM Director Charles Ezell, I'm guessing is the pronunciation of Ezell. The document is a hodgepodge of bipartisan reforms developed under both Trump and former President Biden to accelerate and improve the hiring process, alongside plans to eradicate long-standing efforts to make the federal workforce more reflective of the American populace. Let's eradicate that, right? The American people deserve a federal workforce dedicated to American values and efficient service, they wrote. Yet, federal hiring criteria long ago abandoned any serious need for technical skills and adherence to the Constitution, like giving people political tests for employment. Instead, the overly complex federal hiring system overemphasized discriminatory equity quotas and too often resulted in the hiring of unfit, unskilled bureaucrats. The plan calls on agencies to end any use of racial quotas and preferences in the hiring process, including usage of demographic statistics in hiring, recruiting, retention, and promotion decisions. And it requires agencies to cease collecting and disseminating statistics regarding the composition of the agency's workforce based on race, sex, color, religion, or national origin. As part of the plan, OPM said it will expand its recruiting efforts, particularly at religious colleges and universities, homeschooling and other faith-based groups. How do they do that? That's in people's houses. And apparently conservative spin on the Biden administration's efforts to step up recruitment at historically black colleges and universities. So we need to go to more fake schools. Sure. The aforementioned essay questionnaire, which will be required as part of the hiring process for most federal positions, also queries job applicants on their patriotism quote, commitment to the Constitution, why bother, and the country's, quote, founding principles like habeas corpus, how they would improve government efficiency, and about their overall work ethic. Amidst these plans are efforts to advance bipartisan reforms, as they mentioned, to improve the pace and quality of the hiring process, including advancing skill-based hiring initiatives, shared certifications so that multiple agencies can hire from the same pool of applicants, and shaving the lengthy federal resume, something down, okay, whatever, to better reflect the hiring process in the private sector. I'm not certain what that was supposed to get at, but okay. But one federal HR official said that taken together, this plan will make life harder for hiring managers and applicants alike. Everything in it will make it more difficult to hire, not less. How the F do you define if someone is patriotic? That is a good question. The plan, and that's the way it is. Oh, it's a F dash dash dash. Anyway, the plan also calls on agencies to immediately cease allowing applicants to self-assess their skills and qualifications. But while that system has received criticism because it tends to incentivize job seekers to overstate their experience, an HR official said it still serves a critical purpose of sorting applications on the front end of the process. If we don't have them self-identifying what their skills are, then we have to go through, and instead of them answering the questions, we have to decide what their answer would have been and what their score should be. They said, we have to come through and individually make a paper matrix for each and every applicant and put the competencies they're rated on, and then send that along with all the application packages to a panel of 2 to 3 subject matter experts who have to go through and assign scores based on competencies. And then they have to get their S dash 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 together. That's what it says. Fill out all that and send it back to us, and then we have to manually put in their scores, put them into a category before we can create a certification. It's F, bunch of dashes, insane. Don Kettle, professor emeritus at the University of Maryland and former dean of its School of Public Policy, said that in the administration's fervor to excise all things diversity, equity, and inclusion from the hiring process, it failed to connect its process improvements to agency mission outcomes. I expected to find some linkage between hiring on one side and mission on the other, but there's nothing about this in the mission. And one thing we know is we have a system where the process is out of sync with the mission, he said. To take what is clearly one of the most important effects to look at the hiring process and then to miss the single most important issue that needs to be solved is a major missed opportunity. And the decision to cease data collection and monitoring of the demographic makeup of the federal workforce will hurt both those who study government and agency decision makers themselves, he said. I'm concerned about it, not because it would make it harder to pursue DEI goals as a matter of policy, but that in general, it's important not to throw out information about what it is that you're doing, Kettle said. It would be important to know whether or not you're hiring 90% men for certain occupations. You don't want to blind yourself to the implications of what you're doing. All right, there's wider implications to the story, of course, but chiefly I was attracted to the idea of that's the new ideological test. Tell me, what's your favorite thing about Donald Trump being president, and how will you help with it? Plus, P.S., tell us how patriotic you are, and tell me your favorite executive order. Like, who has any effing idea? All right. Other news at the top here. Oh, we mentioned Tulsi Gabbard, so I should scroll down a little further and give you some other info on that situation. Oh, and we did get to the Pete Hegseth thing. Oh my gosh, that's spinning out of control too. Here's the Tulsi Gabbard information that I had near at hand from Amanda Marcotte at Salon. This is probably last week that she put this one out. Where's the date on this one? Oh, May 28th. Not too far. Okay, couple of days. Tulsi Gabbard grows to become Donald Trump's most dangerous attack dog. Little noticed, I think, in this. Trump's intelligence director peddles new conspiracy theory that stokes MAGA extremism and even violence. Hey, what could be better, right? Donald Trump's conspiracist base is restless these days still irate that they never got the Epstein files, quote unquote, that they were promised. Okay. Futile efforts to keep the conspiracists happy have seemingly become the full-time job of multiple top-level law and intelligence figures in the administration. Over the last weekend, FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino tried to distract the MAGA masses by promising FBI investigations into a baggie of cocaine found at the White House, allegedly, in 2023. Remember that? What else? And more disturbingly, the pipe bombs planted at the DNC and RNC headquarters on January 6th. Their efforts are about fueling baseless right-wing myths that President Joe Biden used drugs, even though, as it turns out, that was a huge problem in the Trump administration. Both of them. And that the FBI was trying to frame the January 6th rioters. Still, there's little reason to believe that Patel and Bongino can do much to keep the MAGA base happy, especially as their investigations are unlikely to produce the desired evidence for the conspiracy theories. Not that that matters. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Her latest foray into generating red meat to stoke the paranoia of Trump supporters isn't just dishonest, but downright dangerous. Late last week, without the mainstream media noticing, Gabbard started pushing the flat-out lie that President Joe Biden was labeling Americans as terrorists because they opposed COVID-19 mitigation measures like masks and vaccines. They just love putting the terrorist label on their own enemies and, to make matters worse, just simply accuse their political enemies of, well, they did this first. They were labeling people as terrorists before we were. We're just following suit, you see. Tit for tat, as though that were a good thing to do. Gabbard started pushing that flat-out lie. Biden, of course, did no such thing, but by pushing this lie, Gabbard is, whether she intends to or not, encouraging the radicalization that does lead to domestic terrorism. Gabbard started stoking this conspiracy theory by declassifying a memo from federal law enforcement detailing the role that COVID-19 disinformation played in encouraging domestic terrorism. For those who bothered to read the 2021 memo, the report isn't surprising, but simply stating the obvious fact that the far-right extremists threatened or plotted violence against the healthcare sector and state and local government officials in 2020. They did. Most famously, I guess, against Gretchen Whitmer, who, as it turns out, is likely to see the people who targeted her be pardoned by Trump. And the latest word on that, by the way, is she's disappointed because President Trump promised her that he wouldn't do that. Wow, that really is something. The memo, though, anticipated that there could be another round of such violence in 2021 in response to the COVID-19 vaccine. But far from equating all anti-vaccine folks with terrorists, the memo was specific about the threat, noting that members of organized militias and white supremacist groups have been using anti-vaccine sentiment as an excuse for violent threats. The average anti-vaccination MAGA rube is not part of this memo. There may be disease vectors, but no, the FBI did not think that they were terrorists, or they may be. Okay, Gabbard knows that Trump voters aren't exactly the reading types, and they will never bother to read this memo, so she and her minions in the MAGA press have been pretending this document was a pretext by the Biden administration to go after Republican voters who didn't break the law. On Fox News on Friday, she told Will Cain that this was an ominous plot. Ominous definitely calls for dramatic music. An ominous plot by the Biden administration to target people for, quote, using their First Amendment rights and to label them a, quote, domestic terror threat. This, of course, I don't know if Amanda gets to it or not, but this is obviously a recycled version of the, you're saying that parents that come to town hall meetings to advocate that their children shouldn't be raped in the bathroom by transgender, but they're terrorists? You're saying they're terrorists? All I want is for my kids not to have to wear masks. Boo-hoo, listen to the parents. And now you're saying we're terrorists. It's the same scam. This is, as she notes, a lie. The memo explicitly states the mere advocacy of political or social positions, political activism, use of strong rhetoric, or even generalized philosophical embrace of violent tactics may not constitute violent extremism and are constitutionally protected. The document highlights the way that COVID-19 conspiracy theories are being used to encourage violence, so law enforcement is aware of the threats to schools, government officials, and healthcare providers to protect them. Gabbard keeps shamelessly lying about this. She retweeted right-wing pundit Michael Schellenberger's declaration, never heard of that guy, that the Biden administration viewed millions of Americans as a terrorist threat. Also probably a conflation with the parents' rights thing. She also retweeted Kane, insisting that the Biden administration labeled, quote, some COVID-19 opponents, whatever that's, I think we're all supposed to be COVID-19 opponents, domestic violent extremists, as if it was their views on COVID-19 alone that drew the label. In reality, the memo clearly states that the focus is on people who are already a threat, such as militia members or white supremacists, and how they are using pandemic disinformation to justify violence. Gabbard's conspiracy theory is spreading rapidly across the MAGA media and through social media influencers, with nary a one admitting that no one was actually ever arrested under Biden for mere speech. The same, of course, cannot be said of Trump, whose administration has been arresting innocent people for no other reason than their political opinions. Of course, Tufts student Rumeysa Öztürk, Columbia graduate Mahmoud Khalil, and Columbia student Mohsen Madawi, all jailed in recent months for the non-crime of speaking out against Israel's war on Gaza. All three are non-citizens, and the administration is claiming broad authority to deport them for their political opinions. Öztürk and Madawi have been released. Khalil is still fighting, worried Israel will kill him if he's deported. This myth that Biden was targeting Republican voters for spreading COVID-19 disinformation functions as, oh boy, here it is, a distraction, but not the kind you were worried about. A distraction for the MAGA audience from their own culpability in Trump's war on free speech. They can tell themselves that Biden did it first, and somehow that makes it okay for Trump to arrest people who've broken no laws simply because they voice opinions he doesn't like. Gabbard is cynically using the power of her office to put an official stamp of approval on this lie, all with a smug expression, knowing her audience wants to believe it so badly they won't bother to learn the facts. But this conspiracy theory isn't just an immoral rationalization of Trump's assault on free speech. By putting this out there, Gabbard is also encouraging more violent extremism. As with Trump's pardons of the January 6th rioters, Gabbard's actions sends the message that the administration will shield domestic terrorists and other dangerous people by minimizing their actions. Extremists are more likely to take violent action if they believe they have official support like this. Gabbard's conspiracy theory also creates a victim narrative that extremists can use to justify violence. Her story is that they are innocent people unjustly targeted by the nefarious Biden administration. Having been recast as victims, any violence they commit now can be narrated as self-defense against the imaginary Democrats coming for their free speech rights. If this seems hyperbolic, it's a good time to remember that Trump's false claims that the election was, quote, stolen from Republican voters inspired the insurrection at January 6th at the Capitol. Gabbard, obviously, is no doubt aware that her dishonesty isn't just gross, but dangerous. She either doesn't care or, like Trump, finds it useful to keep feeding the delusions of the scariest people in the MAGA movement. Well, yeah. She's right about that, which is why we so frequently go to her. And let's see, what other things can we throw in at the last minute here? Well, just about nothing, as it turns out. But maybe one more note on the way out. But gosh, there's a million things that I didn't get to. I'll throw in this one just for your, cause we're kind of up on this story. Trump's Air Force One deal with Qatar, not final. Despite U.S. claims, I can't believe that that could possibly be the case. The delay reflects lingering concerns about legal liabilities stemming from a White House maneuver to transform what was originally a sale between the two countries into a gift. We kind of have to long story short this one, but Qatar is balking at this deal and saying it's not finalized and disavowing this idea that they somehow, well, one, that they originated the idea, and that part's been debunked as well. but that they were conditioning the transfer on a transfer to his library afterwards, that it was their intention that he always be able to use it as a personal plane. And they're saying, yeah, we actually did not include that in our conditioning of this thing and are kind of uncomfortable, one, that it's happening, and two, that you're saying it's us. Despite claims by the Defense Department to the contrary, legal teams representing the U.S. and Qatari governments both have not finalized an agreement for transferring this luxury jetliner that Trump wants for Air Force One. And amid outstanding requests by Qatar for Washington to clarify the transaction's terms, said officials familiar with the matter, Qatar is insisting that a memorandum of understanding between Washington and Doha specified that the aircraft's transfer was initiated by the Trump administration and that Qatar is not responsible for any future transfers of the plane's ownership, these people said. The delay reflects lingering concerns about the legal liability stemming from the White House maneuver to transform what was originally a sale between the two countries into a gift that Trump continues to tout as a major deliverable from his recent trip to the Middle East. I got bribed hugely, like no one's ever been bribed before. Very amazing. And he's quite proud of it, as they point out here in the article. Well, we didn't get to the craziness surrounding Pete Hegseth. Have to wait until next week for that one. And a major weirdo explosion among perverts in Republican politics in Texas as of late as well. We haven't even gotten to that one. No sneaking that one in, though.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And I guess among the most important things that we missed today, thankfully at the top of the schedule today for Justice Putner, who takes over next, a failed attempt to take over the North Carolina State Supreme Court, we've heard about, right? That has new news and more updates. They're still trying, and he's going to have to bring you up to date on that one as we wait until next week to see you again.